Okay, welcome everyone. Let's get going. A lot to discuss this evening, and a lot of it very relevant to what's happening in the world today. If you noticed, things are getting crazier by the day and sometimes by the hour. Let's try to find some of the spiritual roots and maybe a little bit about what we can expect of ourselves, expect of other people. So let's begin. So the topic this evening is actually really called, is there such thing as evil? Which to most people was obvious, right? I mean, evil exists, yeah? Well, let's just assume that it does exist. How and why is a great discussion, but let's just say it does exist. If it does exist, are we expected to go out of our way to defeat evil? Or we're like, some evil people, let them be, that's their problem. I won't deal with them, they won't deal with me. They'll do their thing, I'll do my thing. This is very similar to, I'm going to kind of show my age. There was a show when I was growing up called Star Trek. I only watched the early ones with William Shatner, good Jewish boy. Leonard Nimoy, good Jewish boy. You remember them with the old, duchling thing, I'm talking about? Live long and prosper, right? You watched the Kohanim, you know that story. So I remember when I was watching it, often they would talk about something called the Prime Directive. You heard of this thing before? This is one of the rules that the people on the starship, was it Starship? I think so, lived by. And what was this principle? Well, the whole show basically was this Starship Enterprise would go around from planet to planet and meet aliens, all right? And they deal with aliens on these different planets. Let's say you got to a planet and the aliens weren't very nice. Sometimes they were nice aliens and sometimes they weren't nice. I remember in most cases they weren't nice because, wouldn't be much of a fun show where you turn up on another planet and everyone's like, hey, how you doing? Here, have some food, right? And off you go. So most times they made them into, bad people. But sometimes they would turn up and they would see the aliens treating each other badly. So here's a great question. Imagine you're on the Starship Enterprise and you're on your way to another planet, and you arrive on a planet and you land on this planet, and then you see them doing terrible things to each other. I don't know, killing babies. Doesn't get worse than that, as unfortunately our people have learned over the past month. Yeah? No matter what they say about us. Or attacking and hurting and beating up and, I don't know, killing people in their 80s, whatever it is. Are the people on the Starship Enterprise, you, because you're now the Starship, are you expected to say anything, to have a judgment call? It's a great question, right? You turn up on this planet and they're killing babies. You're like, excuse me, Mr. Alien, Mr. Three Heads and Five Noses, Mr. Green Person, that's a terrible, terrible thing to do. You must stop what you're doing. Yeah? Well, they said no, because we have a prime directive, and we're not allowed to get involved in another society on another planet. This is one of the rules on board, although it wasn't really written out, but it was a given thing, because who are we to say that killing babies is bad? Who are we to say that? In their society, it's okay, and therefore we don't get involved. That was the major principle of Star Trek. If you want to attack me, okay, fine, I'm going to protect myself. But when it comes to you and how you deal with your society, we have no. Let me ask you something. Is that a Jewish principle? Let's say there were Jews on board. Right? I mean, if the Jews on board, they'd probably lose their way and end up at 55 planets anyway. And there were Jews on board. But let's say there were Jews who followed Torah on board. Would they be entitled to have an opinion, to make a statement that what you're doing is right or what you're doing is wrong?
To Jews or to none?
To this other society. It's other people. You're traveling to an alien. You go to another planet, you turn up, they're not Jewish, and you have an opinion about these people. You say yeah?
Yeah, because we have a moral system in place.
But it's not their moral system. They have another moral system. Their moral system, it's okay to kill babies.
It's giving perspective.
What about the Noahide laws?
There's no Noahide laws. Very, very good. We're dealing with another planet. They're not part of planet Earth whatsoever. You're very good, very good. Okay, fine. Okay, we'll plug in Judaism. But right now, you turn up. Are you entitled to say something according to Judaism? So the answer is, and I'll prove it to you, absolutely. Absolutely. It's okay to have an opinion. I know we live in a world where there's no milk or meat, there's no parav, right? It's all up for grabs. Whatever you want to do, whatever you want, it's all okay. And Judaism says it's not that way at all. You know, Avram Avinu spent his entire life going from town to town. That's why he lived in a tent. He was actually very, very wealthy, right? He could have built a nice house. There were houses in his day. You know what I'm saying? He lived in a tent because he wanted to schlep around with his wife in order to impact the world. There was no social media in those days. Probably why he was so sane. And he's traveling around. He's saying, don't kill your kids. Don't worship idols. I was actually in Mexico, and I dragged my wife and kids, which they were not so happy about it, to, what's that place where the Mayans were?
Chichen Itza?
Yeah, Chichen Itza. Wasn't that one, but one like that. One like that. And we went to this place, and we had this tour guide, he was a great guy, Argentinian guy, and he's saying, right, basically, they had various gods on the buildings, like these like face-down gods, and they would do sacrifice. They would sacrifice people. So I was like, oh my goodness, that's terrible. And he said to me, who are you to say it's terrible? That's how they thought they would bring rain down. That's how they thought they would appease the gods, small g, and therefore you can't say it's bad. And I said, but any civilized moral society can make that call. And if I was alive at that time, if I had the guts to do it, I would have said, what you're doing is wrong. But we now live in a world where, who are you to say? Mechatesa. Who says you have the right to make a moral decision on somebody or anybody else? That's the question we're going to tackle with tonight a little bit. Because right now we're dealing with an enemy that says, hey, you do something I don't like, and therefore we can do whatever we want to you. And that is a nation who we're going to refer to, because they themselves refer to themselves as Yishmael. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about this nation a little bit, and let's talk about the idea of how to deal with evil, and whether evil even really exists. I guess we should probably start with that first one. Does evil actually exist? That's not rhetorical. We'll take an answer. Evil exists? Okay, once you say that, you've opened yourself up a whole can of worms. Because now you're saying that there is such a thing as people who make evil decisions. They don't think they are. The Nazis thought they were not evil. The average Nazi, are you evil? No. I'm cleansing the world, right, of these terrible vermin, aka Jews. So they don't call themselves evil. So I'm coming from another society, another culture, saying, no, Nazism, that's evil. That's a big statement, right? I mean, for us it's obvious. But right now, it's not so obvious. There's people who be like, well, you know what? Maybe what they did is wrong, but go look at the context. What was happening before October 7th and all of this stuff. So we, as Jewish people, have to stand up, like Avraham, and say, no, there is such thing as evil. Well, where does it go back to? So let's look at Judaism for a second. Then so I know we're floating around, but we're going to tie it up nicely for you. Let's go back to the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, we have Adam and Chava, right? In Gan Eden. And Adam and Chava had to deal with a choice. They were given free will. They had to have free will. If they didn't have free will, they would never have been in trouble from eating the fruit of the Eitz Hadat, from the fruit of the tree. So there's in the garden, and the first mitzvah they're given is, you can eat whatever you want. You can have whatever you want. You can eat from that tree, except this tree. This tree you can't have. Right? The Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because once you do, you're going to change humanity. For reasons we can't get into now, they chose, well, can't go into detail, they chose to eat from this tree, and it was a deliberate, well-known action. What forced them to do it? This nachash, this snake. Okay? So this nachash represents, it's also a metaphor for evil. But notice the evil was outside. It was outside of them. They could see it, they could relate to it. After this episode, as it were, it entered inside them. It wasn't so clear for all future decisions, for all of us and the rest of humanity, whether something is really bad or really good. Beforehand, it was pretty clear, 99%. There was always a 1% chance, but it was pretty clear. Suddenly, we've entered this whole new realm. And what's that realm? Where things are not so clear. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. There's a nation, by the way, that represents this idea. We've mentioned them before. We're going to mention them again. They're called Amalek. Amalek, this nation that's been a thorn in our sides for millennia, they have one job, to make you doubt yourself. Right? I'll give you a little hint to this. You know, the name Amalek has a gematria, a numerical value of 240. 240. Okay. Happens to be there's another word that has the same gematria. When two words have the same numerical value, we're like, maybe those two ideas are connected. And that is safek, doubt. Safek and Amalek. They're a very famous idea. So why are they connected? So there's many answers to this question. But the one I want to double click on this evening is they make you doubt yourself. You know something's true. You're absolutely convinced, and they come along and they get into your heads and they're like, are you sure? Because maybe there is an argument to why that is actually not a bad thing and why that actually isn't evil, and really exists in all of us. We're all dealing with a little part of us inside us, the little bit of murkiness that's like, well, maybe we're the bad guys, because everyone's saying it. You know what I'm saying? There's marches of hundreds of thousands of people that say that we're the ones that are wrong. There's a little bit of us in our heads that are like, well, maybe I am wrong. Right? They added doubt to the world. Now, originally their doubt was, is God there for you? Is he involved? It was like a God doubt. But it changed very, very quickly. It changed very quickly and became a self-doubt. And this grayness that we've been living with ever since the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden of Adam and Chava, has been with us ever since. All forms of self-doubt, actually, it's much further, all forms of low self-esteem, right, which is a disease which is very, very prevalent in our generation. All forms of, I don't know, emet and sheker, is it really true, is it not true? This primary, I can't see it. Now, we're all used to it, right? But it's a really bad thing, because some things should be a given, and they always were. And suddenly, I'm not so sure. Okay, so that's Amalek. And Amalek are all about getting into your head. Let me put it to you this way. Amalek are great at propaganda. If they're not physically attacking you, they're getting into your head. Just like you see today, we're dealing with major propaganda, and like you know something. You have that feeling, you know it's so clear. And then someone says, nope, that's not the way it is. Really, you ought to play. It's very difficult to react to that, but I know. How do you know? Because I know it. No, you got to prove it. Sometimes it's difficult to prove things because you're not there. You haven't got first-hand knowledge or second-hand knowledge, but you know it. Sometimes you have to go with your gut and stick by your principles. Okay, let's talk about Yishmael, because I got to talk about the parashot of the week and how they reflect what's happening in life today. All right, that's my obsession, by the way. Okay, so in order to do that, I must go to the last pasuk of last week's parashah. So the last pasuk of Parashat Chayei Sarah is very interesting, because it talks about not only Yishmael, but all of his descendants. And all of his descendants are listed out. A whole bunch of them. You're like, why do I care about his kids? He causes enough trouble. Why do I care about his kids? Well, look very carefully what it says. It says that his descendants lived between a place called Havilah and Shur, which is near Egypt at the time, towards Ashur, and al panei kol echav nafal. They fell on all of nafal fell. They fell upon all their brothers. What a strange statement is this? So some commentators say, I'll tell you what it means. It means wherever they go, they're falling and they're taking control of society. That's Bnei Ishmael. That's like an Arab thing. Wherever they are, they fall, they make a big impact, they are where they are. Okay. But I want to do something very interesting. There's a concept in Torah called smichut. I need you to follow very carefully. Smichut. Smichut means when two verses or two themes are put next to each other in the Torah, they're connected. It may not seem they're connected, but actually they are. Just like a blueprint of a house, you'll have a faucet and a sink. Now, if you didn't know what a faucet did and a sink did, you'd be like, just two random objects. But actually, one flows into the other. The Torah is exactly the same. You'll have two ideas put next to each other, but what's happening is those two ideas or themes are connected. So let's connect last week and this week. You with me? Great. So it says, Al Panei Kol Echav Nafal, Yishmael fell upon all of his brothers. And then this week's parasha opens up Ve'ele toldot Yitzchak. These are the generations of Yitzchak, ben Avraham, the son of Abraham. So the rabbis are like, they're next to each other, they're connected. How are they connected? And it goes like this. Listen very carefully. It's a tricky concept, but it goes like this. Yishmael and Yitzchak, right, who are brothers, are actually on a seesaw. That's how I always envision it. So let me just stick with my analogy. When one is up, one is down. When the other is down, the other one is up. There's this constant battle between them. Okay? This is specifically Yishmael and his descendants, because we're talking about his descendants, right? The Arabs today. And Yitzchak and his descendants, that's us, the Jewish people. Although, interestingly, Yitzchak has another descendant called Esav, okay? Who we today recognize as Christendom, right? The Christian world, Rome or Edom, which is still Rome, by the way. The Christian world really is epicentered there. So they're involved in this as well. So we have this trifecta happening over here of Yishmael and the Jewish world and the Christian world that are always battling with each other. This is not my idea. This is the Balaturim. One of the great commentators says, fascinatingly, that at the end of the days, before Mashiach comes, you're going to see this battle between Yishmael and the Jewish people. And when one's up, the other's down. But in order for Mashiach to come, the Jewish people are going to have to go up, and parts, the bad within Yishmael, are going to have to go down as well. What is this based upon? So listen carefully. It goes like this. We know the Jewish people. I'm saying a lot, I realize, but it's going to make sense at the end, I promise you. Stick with me, sisters and brothers. It goes like this. We know the Jewish people have been through 4 exiles in our history, right? The 4 Dalit Galiot. They are the Babylonian exile. That's the destruction of the first temple. The Persian and the Median exile. That's between the first and second temple. That's the whole Purim story. The Greek exile, when the Jewish people were in Israel and the Greeks came and tried to destroy the temple, the lights, and that's Hanukkah, come up in a couple of weeks. That's the 3rd exile, Yavan. And the 4th exile, which is called Rome or Edom, the Christian exile. That's when they destroyed the second temple. Those are the 4 exiles that were shown to Yaakov Avinu in a couple of weeks. We'll see that. He had a dream of a ladder, and that's what he sees. That's the way every yeshiva boy and girl is brought up. The 4 exiles of Jewish history, and when the 4th one ends, Mashiach comes and everything's going to be great. That's how we were brought up. That's what I was told. And then you start to read some other sources, and they say, but there's going to be a 5th exile. 5, Chamsa. And that's called the exile of Adam. Who is Adam? Adam. There's one person in the Torah besides Adam himself, who is everyone obviously, who is called Adam. Who is that? Yishmael. Yishmael was called Pera Adam, a wild man. Now, that doesn't sound like much of a compliment, but actually it is, right? Because he's still an Adam. The other 4 are compared by the prophets to animals, not Yishmael. Yishmael has a certain status based upon what? Being a son of Avram Avinu and being God believers. Being God believers that they respect and they do what they do in order to have a connection to God. How do they do that? I should have spoken from the front now, I realize. How exactly do they do that? 2 things. And this is important. And I mentioned it before, but I've got to mention it again. Number 1, they pray. They're big prayers. How many times they pray a day? 5 times a day, which they get from us, from Yom Kippur. Right? We pray 5 times Yom Kippur. Imagine making 5 services the entire year. Jews would go mad. Right? We barely get a minyan for shacharit, let alone 5 times. But they do it. They don't have the concept of minyan, but they pray 5 times a day. And also, they have another zchut, which is, this is Rav Chaim Vital says this, he was actually a teacher and then a student of the Arizal. He switched places with him. They also have the merit of Brit Milah. Now, they are not commanded to do Brit Milah, but they do Brit Milah, and they're rewarded in a certain way for doing it. We are commanded, so we get rewarded a lot more, right? Because you can't compare one who is commanded to do something and does it, and one who is not commanded to do something and does it. The one who is commanded gets greater reward. Why? Because when you volunteer for something, you can just give it up. But when you're commanded to do it and you're still able to do it because you want to, it's considered a greater thing. Okay? So people in the army are considered greater than the volunteers who just come in and they're kind of like, come and go. Because they're commanded, but they're still able to make it part of their being. And so Yishmael, who my posit is we're still dealing with, and I'll show you from the parasha, they're going to be around right at the end of days, get merit for what they do. So we have a problem. We have a challenge. The challenge is that Yishmael gets zchut. What do they get? Parts of Israel. They get parts of Israel. Which parts? Har HaBayit. That's what he says. The fact that they get Temple Mount, right, is not a coincidence. Actually, it's insane. Actually, it makes no sense. You know that when we conquered Har HaBayit, we took over Yerushalayim, right, back in 67, we had it all, right? Har HaBayit Be'adenu was like the famous thing on the video. And what did, I think it was Moshe Dayan, did probably one of those craziest things in Jewish history. He gave the keys over to the Wakaf, which a bunch of Jordan just gave the keys over. It's so insane that it must be from Hashem. I can't even begin to tell you. So he gave over a piece of land. There's another crazy decision, which was really feeling the reverberations for, and that is kicking the Jewish people out of Gaza. Right? We're now seeing the effects of that. By the way, that's the only, I know I mentioned it before, but I'm going to say it again because it's very topical, the only time in world history that any nation has removed their own people from their own land is the Jewish people out of Gaza. That's crazy. It's just, we've been paying the price ever since, right? I mean, the intentions were good. They were good. Painful at the time. I remember it like yesterday. And so that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a nation that has merit, that through their merit, because remember, Hashem listens, God listens to all prayers. We Jews don't have a monopoly on God. We have a monopoly on Torah, mitzvot, but we do not have a monopoly on God. That's a postulate, that's a given. So when they pray, they could be praying against us. And by the way, there's a lot of people right now who are God believers who are praying down with the Jews. Chas v'chalila. So what are we meant to do? We're going to have to combat them. How? So the parasha tells us something very, very interesting. Let's tie this together. That will take questions or thoughts. We know that Yitzchak had a challenge, okay, because he wanted to give brachot to the next generation. It's this custom in Jewish history and Jewish life that we give brachot to our children, okay, especially before we are about to leave this world. Okay, so now he's going to give brachot, and he's got brachot that he wants to give to his son Yaakov, and brachot he wants to give to his son Esav, because they were both his kids. Now Esav had become evil. He was a bad guy. There's a question whether Yitzchak was aware of how bad it really was. Some say he wasn't, some say he was aware, but we'll leave that aside. Whatever it was, he knew that something was up with him, and yet he wanted to bless him. Why would Yitzchak, if he knew Esav had taken the side of evil, why would he be like this? Why would he want to give him a blessing? Blessing means success for your future and future generations. Why would he do that? Because he had a father. And his father was Avraham Avinu. And his father had the same problem. He had a son called Yishmael. And Avraham felt, I know Yishmael is bad right now. I know, but I got a feeling that he's going to be good in the future. And actually, about Yishmael, he was right. But right now, he's not good. But I want to keep him involved. His wife, Sarah, says, listen very carefully, this is so important. His wife, Sarah, says, I understand what you think. I get it. But he's a bad influence. We got to kick him out. And Hashem said, you're right, get rid of him. Listen to your wife. And Avraham was extremely upset. And he said, okay, I'll do it, but just make sure that Ishmael is going to stick around for a long time. I want his generations to exist. Not in my house, but I want him out there. And we're still dealing with that today. Yitzchak also believed in the power of teshuvah. Yitzchak believed, you know what? I know a person is bad and can do bad and be evil, but I really believe that if we invest in them, they can turn it around. Was he right about Esav? No, he wasn't. He wasn't at all. Esav was bad and remained bad. Yishmael did teshuvah at the end of his life. We know that because he was involved in burying his father Abraham and let Yitzchak go first. That's why it names Yitzchak and then Ishmael, although Ishmael was the oldest son. Didn't work for Esav. Because some people, this is the crunch point I want to get to. Some people are so bad and become so bad that they close off any door that allows them to come back. There's such a concept. It's very difficult for our sensitive ears to hear that. Because we believe no matter how far a person's gone, there's always a way back. But some people become so evil, they become so thoroughly bad that they themselves close off. We saw this with Paro. Paro was given a number of plagues to help fix him. He got to a point after the 5th plague, he got so bad that his free will was wiped out, and he was forced to keep doing bad even if he didn't want to. There is such a concept where evil is so far and so gone, there is no redemption. So I know we don't like to think, yeah, but inside everyone there is good. Maybe there is, and maybe there isn't. But sometimes you've got to deal with evil the way you must deal with it. And Avraham Avinu did that. Avraham Avinu, I know we like to think of Avraham Avinu, my kids bring home projects, and he's smiling, and bring people to his tent, and bring them close to God. But believe me, he spent a lot of his time slamming and telling people off. No doubt about it. No doubt about it whatsoever. Okay. So now we're dealing with a number of things. Let's tie this together. We have this nation called Amalek, who are trying to wipe us out all the time. We have this nation called Ishmael, who are going to do teshuvah at the end, although it's hard to believe. We have this nation called Esav, right? This Edom, this 4th exile, that's really going to be a big problem until the end of days. And there's very little redemption. Amalek comes from Esav. They're the bad of Esav. Esav has some good inside them as well, but there's bad as well. Ishmael has good inside it right now. We're seeing certain nations that want to make real peace with us. Nations that we never thought would, but we're seeing that as well. Okay. Let's bring it back. So now we have Yitzchak giving a blessing to Esav because he thinks he can bring it back. He can't. And by the way, what was Rivka's stance on this whole thing? It was Rebecca, Yitzchak's wife. Did she believe that her son, Esav, would be able to fix stuff up? Did she think he was redeemable? She's like, it's not going to work. Right? Listen to your wife. They have bina yetera. They have a deeper knowledge and they understand. But by the way, she knows because she was feeling it even while she was pregnant. You see, when Rivka was pregnant, she was pregnant with twins, Yaakov, Esav. And there's a very, very famous Rashi that says she was having major problems, although she couldn't have kids for a long time, but once she was pregnant, it was very, very painful inside her. There was a lot of battle between these twins inside her. And Rashi says, I'll tell you the problem. Every time, anyone know this Rashi, very famous Rashi, every time she passed a house of worship, a good place, she would feel boom, boom, boom from one child. And every time she passed a place of Avodah Zarah, she felt boom, boom, boom on the other side. She's like, what's going on over here? Something's happening over here. How? She knew, but she knew this was more than just, painful contractions. It was more than just like Braxton Hicks, right? Okay. So what does she do? She goes to ask God. Right? You got to probably ask God. Well, how do you ask God? Who do you go to? Who do you go to? You go to speak to the Gadol Ador. Go speak to the greatest rabbi alive. Right? There's no rabbis in those days, but there was a great man, and his name was Shem. Maybe he wasn't alive at that point, but Ever, his son, was available. So there was a yeshiva, and she went to this great, great individual to ask him what's going on. And he had certain spiritual insight. So she went to his yeshiva, and she walked in and said, listen, I'm having a major problem. All right? What do you say about this? What's happening? I'll tell you what's happening. You're going to have twins. She goes, I knew something was up. And one of them is going to be a great, great tzaddik, and one of them is going to cause a lot of trouble in the world. And she starts to freak out, right? Well, first of all, there's a big question here. You mean there's something called an evil fetus? I mean, that's what she was told. Could there be an evil fetus? Well, according to the simple reading of Rashi, yeah. The evil fetus is the one who, when they passed the place of Avodah Zarah, wanted to go out and worship idols. But How could a fetus want to do that? That's a good question. I'm not sure the answer. But I'll give you a different answer to a related question. And it goes like this. Really, there is no such thing as a bad fetus. No one's born bad. No one's born into sin. But people are born with different attributes. Okay? This is very important. Those attributes in some people, and we kind of know this, right, could be extreme. Very, very strong. People are born. I see with my own kids. Every one of my kids, right, they don't come out the same. You see very, very early on, from day one, a certain personality in every child that kind of sticks with them. So one of my kids came out very calm and was a great baby, and now is absolutely crazy. But you know what? But most of them, you kind of see very, very on what's going on with their personality. Does that mean they're bad? And the answer is no, they can't be bad, because you're not born bad, but you're born with certain strong attributes. And those attributes could be used for good or bad. Let me be very clear. This is very important. It goes like this. The Gemara says there are people who are born under the star sign of Mars, whatever that means, and they are born with the desire for blood. There's some people who are born, they like blood. Me, I can't stand the sight of it. But there's some people who like blood. So you're like, well, that's a very bad person, right? Must be an evil person. It's not necessarily evil, because they could become a doctor, a shochet, or a murderer, right? There's some people who are born with great mathematical abilities. You know those kids who just want to beat up in class, right? They just drive you crazy. I know the answer. I'm like, oh, please, it's calculus. Get a life. You know what I'm saying? And the answer is, because some people have that ability, they could be born with the ability to do math. Now, they could become great mathematicians or accountants, right? Or run a finance office and do great good with their money. Or they become gamblers and, mafia bosses. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It's up to you. But you're born with an attribute. And your job is to choose that and choose good, because we all have free will. Now, let's get back to these twins. According to this, Esau was not bad. She was being told that he could end up bad. But what is his essence? His essence is avodah zarah. But that's not good. You can understand it to be that his job, and this is very important, his job in life was a good job, which was what? To destroy avodah zarah. How? With physical means. That's what his job was. So it's a very interesting interpretation. And it's an interpretation, but it kind of fits in. And his job was to go and to bring down badness in this world with his might, with his hands. Did he choose that? No. He chose instead to join Team Bad. Right? Because you can fight them or you can join them. And he joined them. So, Kol Yaakov, Vayadai midei Esav. This is what Isaac Yitzchak said when he was presented with Yaakov dressed up as Esav. He put on this furry outfit. He got dressed up, which, by the way, is the root of getting dressed up in Purim. If you want to know the first person who got dressed up as somebody else, right? The whole Purim thing, getting dressed up, it comes from this story, by the way. The roots of dressing up in Purim is another nation in order to not to accept who you are and pretend you're something else, which is why we laugh at ourselves on Purim, comes from this story. Had it not been for this story, we probably wouldn't be dressing up on Purim, right? Okay, that's another discussion. We have to Purim. Let's get through Hanukkah first of all. And so, we have the situation where Yitzchak is now faced with this dilemma. He's like, I get the sound, but I'm getting the hands. I'm not getting it. The two don't go together. And he was right. Because what was meant to happen was that Yaakov and Esav were meant to work as a team. Team Yaakov Esav. We were meant to work together with this other nation. But what happened was, Esav opted out. And by the way, he opted out of a shidduch as well. Who was Yaakov and Esav meant to marry? Twin boys for twin girls. They say that Rachel and Leah were twins as well. It was the older twin for the older twin and the younger twin for the younger twin. Esav was meant to marry Leah, and Yaakov was meant to marry Rachel. What did Esav say? I'm not interested. I'm out of the family. What did Yaakov have to do? He's like, well, I've got to fix this, right? Because Leah is meant to be a mother as well and create an amazing nation. You're meant to do it, but if you're not, I'll do it. But you're not allowed to marry two sisters. That's asur. Unless one sister dies, then you can marry another sister. But this is before the Torah was given, and therefore it was permitted. That's why they were buried separately, because once the Torah was given, it would be embarrassing to see Yaakov buried next to two sisters, which is asur min Torah. So Hashem arranged it. The Yaakov and Leah will be buried in Marat HaMachpelah, right, which is grandfather bought for a lot of money, and Rachel will be buried elsewhere. Otherwise, it's embarrassing, because we know one person got married to two sisters, and that'd be very, very embarrassing. Hashem arranged it that after the Torah, it wouldn't look bad upon this family. But that wasn't plan A. Plan A was the Esav would do, but he opted out. So he opted out of the family. He opted out of his mission in life. His mission was to be Yedei Esav. And what's Yaakov saying? I don't want to do this. I don't want to fight wars. I am Kol. I'm all about spirituality and speaking. And Hashem says, I know, but Esav's out. So we got a problem. And what's our problem? You're going to have to fight as well. Enter stage left, Jewish armies. I don't want to do it. I get it. But Yedei Esav, you're going to have to do it. But I don't like it. It's horrible. Fighting and blood, it's not my natural place. I get it. I understand. But he opted out, and someone's going to have to do it. But I want to just sit and be philosophical and pray to Hashem and do Torah and mitzvot and be a spiritual being. I hear. But that's just not the way it is. We're now stuck with plan B. And that's where we are. How long does this have to go on for? So there is, thank God, a shelf life to this problem. And what's the shelf life? So, one final story, and we'll tie this together. Listen very carefully. There's a weird episode in the parasha that as a kid I used to be like, what are they even talking about? What is this story all about? So the story is that Yitzchak turns up, and there were certain wells where you used to get water out of, that his father Abraham dug in order to get water out. And the Philistines, the Palestinians of his day, which have no relation to Palestinians at all to nowadays, but we'll leave that aside, they came along and they filled them up. Not very nice, right? You build a beautiful well, and you open it up, and there's water for everyone, and these people came there. So Yitzchak turns up and says, I want to redig the wells of my father Abraham. So on the surface, although we're not on the surface, we're now in a well, this is a story about, why do I care about digging wells? Well, the story continues. So comes along Yitzchak, who at this point is living in a place called Gerar, right? Gerar. And he's living there, and he comes along, and he has his people dig a well. And there were shepherds who lived in Gerar who were like, no, we don't like it. And they started to fill it in. So he's digging there, filling. And there's this whole argument, and he's like, I see we have a big problem over here. I'm going to call this well Esek. Esek means argument. Okay. I don't know why you're naming wells, right? Every water source has to have a name. Strange. Okay. Story continues. And this is the parasha. He comes along and says, no problem. I'm going to dig another well. And he gets his people to start digging. And the people in Gerar, the shepherds are, no, we don't like this well either. And we're going to fill it in. So they're arguing over it. He's like, this is a place, I'm going to call this well Sitna, which means harassment. Because you harassed me, because I'm digging this well, just like my father dug a well. Strange story. Right? Digging wells, they fill it in, arguing, very, very unusual. And the story continues. And you read in the parasha. He comes along and he digs a third well. And suddenly, for some reason, they don't fill this one up. And he's like, thank goodness. This well is going to be left alone, and I'm going to call it, anybody know? Very good, Rehovot, which happens to be a town in Israel. I don't know if it's related, maybe it is. But the word Rehovot is very interesting, Because Esek means argument. Sitna means harassment, right? Not good. Rehovot means a wide expanse. A wide expanse. Comes along the Ramban, Nachmanides, and he says, let me tell you what's really happening over here. This is not an argument about wells. No one cares about water sources. Well, a lot of things do happen around water sources, including, by the way, finding a wife, right, or a husband, happens around water. So after this class, you can all make your way to the water fountain over here, and a good place to meet someone, God willing. Anyway, says the Ramban, it's true that water has a lot to play. And we know that water represents good things. Good things. And these three wells represent the three temples in Jerusalem. And the first temple, he said, we're going to have Esek. We're going to have arguments over it. Because the Nebuchadnezzar, right, the Babylon is going to come, and we're going to build it, and they're going to cover it over. Because Ein Mayim El Torah. And they're going to cover it, they're going to like it, and they're going to destroy it, they're going to cause a lot of trouble. But it's okay, because we're going to dig another well. And that well is called Sitna. Why? Because there was harassment between the Jewish people. We were not good to each other. So comes along Hashem and he says, I have to destroy that temple as well. The second Beit HaMikdash would have to be destroyed and wiped out by the Romans. Remember that one? The fourth Galut we spoke about. Comes along the Ramban and says, but there's going to be a third and final well. And if you'll notice in the parasha, there's no arguments about it. Why not? Because this well is going to last forever. It's the third and final well. Why is it called Rehovot? Why is it called Rehovot? Why is the well that represents the third temple, according to the Ramban, called Rehovot?
It's wide enough to take all the Jewish people.
So, yeah, I mean, he actually says that not only is it going to be much bigger and much more beautiful, right, than the first and second Beit HaMikdash, but it's going to be an expanse, and Yerushalayim is going to be much bigger, and this is important, because we're going to see this play out, I believe, over the next coming months and years. This third and final Beit HaMikdash that Yitzchak and Yaakov were alluding to is going to be the third and final temple. And this temple is, number one, going to last forever, because this well was not filled up. It's going to be the third and final Beit HaMikdash that won't be destroyed. And the land of Israel is going to be much, much larger. We are going to see an expanse of land. Some people say the holiness of Israel is going to cover the entire world. Maybe yes, maybe no. But we do know that the boundaries of the land of Israel are going to be much larger. And this is not original to here, because we know that Avraham Avinu was promised that the land of Israel was going to have 10 nations that we were going to conquer, his descendants. But we know how many nations, Canaanite nations, were conquered when Joshua went into Israel? 7. So we're missing 3. Kenizi, and Kadmoni. That's how they were known. Those 3 were not conquered. He says, when Mashiach comes, when this third and final temple is built up, and which we're getting close to, this is the point of Daddy's talk, trying to give some hope to the people, is going to be bigger and better. And Yishmael is going to do teshuvah. And they are going to, now I've been saying this for years, it's hard for me to believe what I'm saying to you, but I've read it in a number of sources, so I'm going to say it anyway, although I'm going to be straight up. It's hard for me to actually imagine this with what we're seeing on the streets and online and all this kind of stuff, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I like to be consistent. The Yishmael descendants are going to give us the land very openly and very proudly and say, it's yours now, and we don't want to interfere. I've said that before. I'm sticking with it. It's hard for me to believe that they are going to voluntarily hand back the keys to Temple Mount and say, it's okay, it's time to build the third and final temple, which isn't just your temple, it's a temple for everyone. L'kol ha'amim, says the prophet Isaiah. Everyone is going to benefit. Actually, the rabbis tell us that had the non-Jewish people known how bad it would be for the entire world when they destroy the temple, they would never have done it. Because the goodness that would come out of the Beit HaMikdash, the Jewish people living in peace in Israel, the goodness affects the entire world. Ki mitzion tzeitzei Torah d'vay Yerushalayim Yerushalayim. The entire world is affected positively. Right? They're actually shooting themselves in their own foot. So that's my position. Hard for me to download that into my head nowadays, considering how much a difficulty we are having. Let's just sum up, because we said a lot today. I realize that. Let's just take out the choice pieces. We said that there is no prime directive in Judaism. When it comes to Torah, when it comes to emet, there is such a thing as emet, there's such a thing as sheker. There is evil. How can it be though? Because God is all good, everything comes from good. Because God gives us free will and you can make a choice. But Esav was bad in the womb. He wasn't bad in the womb. He had an inclination, right? The inclination was to be strong. And he chose wrong. Yishmael chose wrong and then did teshuvah. So Yitzchak felt it could be. But in the end, Rivka said, no. Esav is beyond reproach. And she helped her son get the brachot, which ended up causing a lot of hassle and problems that we're still dealing with today. Yishmael will come back. Esav, particularly Amalek, which is the bad within Esav. There's good within Esav. There's always some good. But the bad within Esav is Amalek. That we're going to have to deal with, and we are dealing with now. And I've mentioned it before, I'll say it again. Whenever you see a nation that wants to hurt us really badly, with no way of talking them out of it, right? There's no land you can give them, there's no money. You know, some people are buyable, right? Some people, you can kind of like work with them. You make peace with them, although you on different pages. But some people, they just don't care. They want to destroy you, even though it makes no sense. Like the Nazis, like Hamas. There's nothing you can say. They've created a jihadi death cult. There's no other way to describe it. Such people have forfeited the right to life. It's horrible to say, and it's hard for me to say, and it wasn't meant to be said. Had Esav not chosen that path, that bad path, right? If Yishmael did teshuvah early, we wouldn't have to deal with it. But this is what was stuck on Yaakov's plate. He was stuck with this duality of two worlds. Kol Yaakov, the voice, the holy voice is Yaakov, aval yadayim yadei Esav, but my hands are going to have to get involved in things that I don't want to be doing. We don't like it, but we still got to do it. But you can have an opinion, and you can speak out. Happens to be that tomorrow, we're going to have to do the Kol Yaakov. Those who are going, we're schlepping to Washington, right? And there's a tradition. You've got to stand, you've got to make a voice, right? You've got to make a voice and say that this is what we believe, and what they're doing is wrong. And don't be scared to do it. It's okay. Don't put yourself in a life-threatening situation, right? I personally would not walk through a Hamas rally right now wearing a yarmulke, like in London. It's just the way it is. But you've got to make a stand. You've got to make your call stand out. So this is the duality. We, here in America, for the most part, Baruch Hashem, don't have to deal with a physical battle. That's left to our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel. They're taking on the Yadayim Yadei Esav to deal with the challenge over here. But here it's our call. And that call comes in various forms. Primarily, though, I've got to say it, because this is what tradition teaches us, it's tefillah. We have to make sure that our tefillot be their tefillot. Because they are praying, right, to Hashem that we should be destroyed. And Hashem listens to all tefillot. So we have to make sure that our ma'asim and our kol beats their tefillot as well. And God willing, the third and final well will be dug. The third and final Beit HaMikdash will be built. At that point, there will be no more war, as the prophet tells us very, very clearly in a number of places. There'll be no more war, no more bloodshed. That's actually, according to the Rambam, the main difference between before Mashiach comes and after Mashiach comes is that there's no more wars at all in the entire world. And all the money that we're spending on weapons and the whole military complex, which is sadly important now, is going to go towards good things. Right? And if that to happen tomorrow, I think we'd get rid of most suffering in the world. I think. I'd like to think so. God willing, we will see that. And keep your prayers strong. Thanks, everyone.